G'day Guardians, my name is Matt, and today I am bringing you a hunter build with the Exotic Arms Liar's Handshake. The idea for this build is that you can go into Gambit and you can be one of the MVPs for the team, grabbing as many motes as possible, slaying as fast as possible, and getting those easy wins. Throughout the video, I'm going to be showing you some mods to use for the build, the stats that I think you should spec into, and some weapons that pair really nicely with this exotic. If the build ends up being really helpful for you, please consider coming back to the video and dropping a like. Alright, let's jump into it. So Liar's Handshake. Why are we using this exotic in 2021? Well, using your arc melee ability, or just being hit by a melee attack, will allow you to follow up with an extremely powerful melee counterpunch that also heals you. It pairs really nicely with Top Tree Arc Strider. Now, the one thing that we're trying to aim for with this build is activating 3 stacks of this combination blow. Killing an enemy with this melee ability allows health regeneration to trigger. It also increases damage temporarily. When you get that 3 stacks, it is super nice, especially paired with some of the mods that we're running with this build. Because this build severely revolves around the combination of using a melee kill, dodging, and getting your melee back through Gambler's Dodge, this will allow you to keep that chain continuously going. Although if you mess it up by dodge rolling when there's no enemies nearby, so it doesn't refund your melee, you know that you can also just get an easy melee kill, which will give your dodge back, and then you're allowed to go back into action by dodging, which gives you your melee back. I know that sounds like a mouthful, but when you get into the battlefield, it'll make a lot more sense. Another great perk to the subclass is Deadly Reach. Dodging increases your melee range, allowing you to lunge further to strike enemies. You'll see in some of the gameplay within this video, after I dodge roll, I'm able to lunge towards enemies a mile away, which really helps with the maneuverability within the Gambit battlefield. The last perk to the subclass is Lethal Current. I don't find it comes into play too often, but it does add a little bit of benefit. After dodging, each arc staff hit creates a damaging lightning aftershock. The idea with pairing this subclass with Liar's Handshake is that you can head into battle, get yourself a melee kill, start generating that combination blow, dodge roll, get your melee back, and then you can start getting powered melee kills, which will start generating health, getting your dodge roll back every single time, and it becomes an infinite loop between dodge roll and melee. Alrighty guys, let's have a look at some of the stats that I'm running for this build. Nothing here is really essential to the success of it, but if you have some extra mod slots on your armor, or if you have some high statted armor that you can play around with in dim, these are some of the stats that I would recommend running. For mobility, I would not go any higher than 5. We are not looking to increase our jump speed or our walk speed, and we are getting our dodge back on every powered melee hit, so I wouldn't go any higher than that. For resilience, I would try to aim as high as possible. We want to be able to tank as much damage to our shields as possible because we are running into the thick of it in every single part of Gambit. For recovery, try to go as low as possible and don't spec into it, purely because every melee kill we're getting is going to be giving us a nice chunk of health back. The appeal to this build is that we are running in and we are killing things fast. We don't have time to stop and heal anyway, so don't spec into recovery if you can. Any leftover mods, I would go for Discipline. Having your grenade up as often as you can is always great, but again, it's not really necessary. I wouldn't spec any higher than 5 for Intellect because we are running Font of Wisdom, and with Font of Wisdom up for most of our time in the Gambit match, that is basically equivalent to an extra 5 points. So realistically, this is kind of like 100 intellect as it is. And strength is not important at all because we are running Gambler's Dodge, and every time we're dodging, we're getting that back anyway.
Your allies invade.
Let's dive into the mods that we're using for this build to help it be as seamless as possible out there on the Gambit battlefield. We're starting off with Melee Wellmaker, which all of our melee kills are generating elemental wells. We're also running double hands-on. Normally this mod is a 3 arc cost, but at the moment in the seasonal artifact it is 1 without an affinity tied to it. I have made my helmet an arc affinity just in case next season I want to continue running this and I don't have to muck around with changing my helmet's affinity. On my arms, I'm running elemental charge. With all those wells that we're making with our melee kills, this allows us to get 2 stacks of charge with light every time we pick up one of those wells. I'm also running double impact induction, which means that our grenade cooldown is getting reduced every time that we're doing damage with our melee, which is essentially all of the time. On our chest piece, we are running protective light as well as 2 melee damage resistances. I feel like these 2 are a must because we are running into the thick of it and we're taking so much damage for our team. that this gives us that little bit more survivability, although Protective Light is giving us a large amount of survivability. Every time we pick up those Elemental Wells, we're getting 2 stacks of light, and if we ever need it, that Protective Light is going to come in handy to keep us alive in those sticky situations. On the legs, I'm running Well of Ions, which is picking up an Arc Elemental Well is going to increase the damage dealt from my next melee. Now this is great when you're coming across yellow bars or any of the high value targets within Gambit. Absolution is not necessary for the build, although I feel like it is also just a nice little passive to have. And lastly, on our cloak, we are running Double Bombers, which is reducing our grenade cooldown every single time we do a dodge, and that's happening all of the time. We're also running a Font of Wisdom, and with all of those Elemental Wells that we are generating through our melee kills, this will allow us to have an improvement on our recharge rate on our super, again allowing us to maybe pull off 2 to 3 supers per game. There's no real weapons that are necessary for making Liar's Handshake successful in Gambit. I do recommend having a shotgun that has 1-2 punch, as that extra damage is really nice after you get the shot off, especially against mages, envoys, or even the Primeval itself. The ignition code having blinding grenades is great for getting in there and getting started with the Liar's Handshake chain, with the melee and dodge, although either of these aren't really a necessity to having a successful build here. While running this build is a ton of fun and it absolutely shreds, I do want to touch on some of the pros and the cons to running it. One of the pros to running Liar's Handshake with Top Tree Arc Strider is that it is a killing machine. It's a lot of fun and you can collect motes as fast as possible to get those blockers in, allowing you to invade and allowing you to then summon the Primeval as quick as possible. If you can manage to perfect the infinite loop between melee and dodge with this build, you will be untouchable because you're going to be constantly regenerating health and you're going to be dishing out very powerful melee attacks. It's the perfect combination to have on the team, collecting the motes, diving in there and tanking everything. Another cheeky little benefit to running this build is that if you're trying to guild Dredgen as fast as possible at the beginning of the season, there's a triumph called Good Company where you can be rewarded progress for banking the most motes across the team, not dying, and dealing the most damage to different combatants. In a good game using Liar's Handshake, you can usually get 3 of these out of 1 game, meaning that you can probably check it off in a handful of matches. At the moment, in Season of the Lost, the meta for burning the Primeval is generally using 1k or fusion rifles with particle deconstruction. If you don't have any ammo, this build has another little perk to it where you can just stun lock the Primeval by continuously meleeing it. You can see in the clip where I'm just constantly pushing him back and he's defenseless, and it just lets my teammates do the rest of the work here. While there's some great things that you can do with this build, it does have a couple downfalls. One of them is if the Primeval is the meatball, there's not too much you can do in terms of your melee. With any other of the Primeval bosses, you can get them into a bit of a stun lock, but with meatball, you just have to be reduced to weapon damage. Another con is the medium blockers. For some reason, these guys do not like to be melee to death, so it does rely you pulling out your shotgun or pulling out your weapon and getting a few shots to maybe stun him, and then you can go in for the melee. It's not a huge deal, but sometimes it catches you off guard and it is quite annoying. And lastly, like anything in Destiny, getting overrun can just completely ruin the build and ruin your run inside of the Gambit match. You can see in the clip below, I just get completely overrun and the ogres just shred me. So sometimes it just doesn't work out, but that's like any build in Destiny. As long as you give it a go, have fun, that's the main thing. To close out the video, I just want to mention that I really enjoy playing this build. Whenever I play a Gambit as my hunter, it's my go-to. Unfortunately, there's nothing too similar to this on Warlock and Titan, so every time I do jump on, it is a ton of fun. It's not exactly the greatest endgame build. You wouldn't run it in a Grandmaster or a Master Vogue, otherwise your fire team might absolutely hate you. But for low-end content in PvE or just Gambit in general, I think it's a lot of fun and I think it has a lot of utility to help you win those matches. If you've made it to the end of the video, thank you so much. If you have any thoughts, I'd love to hear it in the comments. Perhaps there's some mods that you'd prefer to run instead of the ones I've suggested. I would love to hear it because this is one of my favorite builds and I'd love to see all different versions of it come into fruition. Thanks so much for watching. Take it easy, Guardians.